Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Open Mic Next in Health event here at the Novartis Pavilion. I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm very excited to hear a conversation about the role of health tech and AI in cancer treatment. My name is Rael. I am hosting this event with Switzerland Innovation Park, Basel area, which is operating an office for small ventures in health tech here on the Novartis campus, but also at other locations at the main campus in Allschwil and in the canton of Jura. We are using Mentimeter. There will be a slide, it's showing up now. You can scan the QR code and send in your questions to Quiva, who will then take it up during the discussion. Now, this series has been going on since 2022 and is curated by Day One Healthcare Innovation. And with me on stage is my dear colleague Ursula Costa, Director of Day One. I hand over to you.
Thank you, Rahel, and welcome everyone on site and online. So I'm really excited to be once more here at the Novartis Pavilion and thank Novartis for supporting us through this series. So today we are going to have an exciting discussion on the role of AI in cancer care. But before of that, I have some news from the Day One team. And that's that 3 weeks ago or 2.5 weeks ago, we actually launched our new cohort of the accelerator. And for those of you that don't know us yet, so we run an accelerator program to support startups that enable pharma R&D. And we have 15 amazing ventures this year that are worth checking. You can get the link to the 15 ventures and their descriptions on that QR code. On top of that, today you can actually meet in person, 3 of them. We will have RLT, Nanolix Biologics, and Paritera outside. So for those of you that haven't done that yet, please make sure during the apero you get to stop and talk to the CEOs and founders that are here to explain you their solutions. And just a quick teaser on what they do. We have RLTs, Leah, if you can raise your hand so they can recognize you easily. So RLTs is developing a digital platform to facilitate access to innovative cancer care. And they do that by facilitating and by orchestrating all the organization across disciplines. And we have George, that I don't see, thank you so much, from Nanolix Bio, and they are developing conditionally active nanobody drug conjugates targeting treatment-resistant cancers. Sorry about that. So another very different approach to the use of AI in cancer care. And lastly, we have Paritera. You can talk anytime during the apero to Antoine, who enables single-cell RNA sequencing directly from whole blood. And they are able to isolate and barcode cells for deep molecular insights that unlock profiles that unlock new insights. So please don't miss the chance, because for the first time, beyond the panel discussion, you get the chance to actually talk and interact with the founders that are here that are really disrupting the way cancer treatment is done today. So without more ado, I just want to give the stage to Quiva, who will moderate this session today. And please, Benjamin Kasenda, Tim Heinemann, Manish Khatri, Quiva Valeli, take the stage. We are really looking forward to hear all your insights.
All right, folks, thank you very much for joining us in this quarter's open mic. I'm very pleased with the panel that we have on today, and I'll give you a reason why in a second. So essentially, today we're focusing on AI in oncology and cancer therapeutics and cancer care. Obviously, we're all very aware, first of all, cancer is not a single disease. It's a large spectrum of diseases, depending on the who you speak to, actually, a lot of the time. But essentially, it is one of the diseases that will have the ability to impact most from a large amount of health tech and AI implementation. However, we're at a turning point where our understanding and our ability of understanding the science, the biology, and the technology that is developed is streets ahead of how well we actually implement it. So one of the things we want to talk about today is essentially whilst we hear a lot of these incredible breakthroughs and changes that are being made, how close are they, A, to being usable, and B, how close are they to actually being implemented in clinical practice? And so we're very lucky that we have 3 people across the full value chain of research, development and clinical practice who are going to give us their input on exactly how they see AI and health tech in their day-to-day lives in cancer development and cancer treatment development. So I'm going to sit down now. I'm not going to introduce myself because most of you know me and I'm not interesting today. The 3 people to my left are the interesting people today. So I'm going to hand over to them and get them to introduce themselves individually. So Manish, do you want to kick us off?
Absolutely. Thanks, Kuva. I'm Manish Khatri from Novartis, 15 years in the industry, most of that in the D part of R&D, and in current role, I work on deploying AI models in clinical development for our clinical programs, particularly focused on the oncology portfolio. So looking forward to this part of the conversation and focus on the development piece. I've spent most of my time in large pharma, all of those 15 years, some of it a small bit in biotech as well. By nature of that, have gone outside development into regulatory quality and so on as well from a AI and data science standpoint. So looking forward to the discussion and thank you all for attending. Give it over to Tim.
Thank you, Manish. I'm Tim Heinemann. I'm a senior computational biologist at CSEM in the group AI for Life Sciences. My background is in biophysics, systems biology. And then since I did my PhD at the German Cancer Research Center, the topic oncology never really left my focus. Today I'm conducting projects at the intersection between industry and academic research. And we focus on developing AI pipelines that are contextualizing multi-omics data sets, integrating them, and then with a specific focus on explainable AI to increase trust. And so, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting.
And last but not least, we have Benjamin at the end.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Benjamin Cassenda. I'm a senior medical oncologist at the University Hospital and currently heading the Cancer Center, at least for 3 years. So it's always a rota, so I'm elected. And I'm practicing oncologist, also hemato-oncologist, and have also background in clinical epidemiology. Today sounds a bit odd. Nowadays some would say data science. So I'm I like data, and I like to apply these data to the clinics and to design trials and how to make our care better. So all the research I've done so far is mainly focusing on improving treatment and diagnostic steps and algorithms. And I'm also happy that I'm supporting our AI group at the University Hospital. We have a strong AI hub with our own GPU clusters for the open source models, and we try to implement AI into our workflows. And I think this is something we're going to discuss today.
Brilliant. So I think we'll set the stage and maybe start off the discussion with looking at the foundational science, the data science behind the models that we want to move into real-time cancer care. So I'm going to ask, we talked a bit in my intro where I mentioned about the speed at which technology develops. So Tim, I'm going to come to you first of all and say, AI models can become outdated very, very quickly as new data arrives. How do you think about model maintenance and updates in the healthcare system compared to consumer AI?
Yeah. I mean, as you put out, rightfully, AI models age as soon as they're on the market, as soon as they're applied, and with eventually new data arriving. And in the consumer AI, that's not so much of a problem. It's even desired to quickly iterate through different cycles of the model and then learn from the mistakes. And then you can quickly incorporate them, update them, and then, sometimes if it's not too harsh, even deal with the feedback. If you go to healthcare AI, you immediately in a more restricted environment, you have regulatory landscape to follow. So you really want to make sure that you know where what data your model is trained on, what biases are in that data, and all sorts of problems with your data. So there are two scenarios. So either if you want to retrain, you train with data of the same type, and then that's fine, and probably you already have some idea about those biases and difficulties of the data. But then if you, for example, want to add another data modality, a different omics type, a different architecture, then you have to do basically all the checks from the start and really observe if you fall under different regulatory requirements and so on. So this fast iteration is then not possible anymore, but it's also good because you want to avoid that your AI predicts something you don't want.
So Manish, you look like you might have something to add there with regards to the regulation side of things.
Absolutely. So like Tim was saying, all of healthcare use of AI is in the regulated space, more or less. We are using AI for, let's say, for the purposes of training the models that will have a role in clinical trials or drug discovery. If the data going into it is not giving the right output, and I emphasize this every single day in my role, that the data that goes into any AI is far more important than the model itself. The model will speak what it is trained on, and a small sort of quality gap in the data, a small amount of missing data can play a vital role in changing the course of the model and having a much larger impact than we can think of, even if it's a small number of patients in a fairly large data set. And when it goes through the regulation side of things, regulators across the globe have processes to validate these models from very different angles, right? And one part of that is the data needs to be diverse enough, for example, to represent all geographies there are, and that's why a data set that gives a certain output in the US may not give the same output in a different geography. So the data changes its shape and form going into the model depending on what the purpose is, and the purpose can change depending on where you treat the patients or what you're developing with the AI model, so to speak.
So I'm going to follow up a little bit on that one, because there's a huge amount of hype in AI is going to fix everything, especially now there's an awful lot of impact on and discussions on Gen AI as well. So if you were looking specifically at any tips, so there are people in the audience that will be working on algorithms and sentences that are based on AI and data. So if you mentioned that any small defect is actually going to have a huge long-term or downstream impact on the outcome of your product. So what are maybe if you give top 3 things that you would recommend that people actually look at when they're developing AI products?
Absolutely. I wish I could say the top 3 things are data, and data, right? But in the order of importance, right, data always would be the first. And I think a fair amount of time in looking at what data are you working with, the quality of it, the quantity plays an important role as well. There is a misconception often that for AI you need large data sets, far from the truth, right? So quality, quantity, application, downstream context of use, and on the downstream context of use, you need sort of frequent foresight to think about what is the end goal and keep coming back to what will be the data needed for that. So data would always be my absolute first thing to watch out for, and what are you working with. This is the ingredients that is going to make the AI meal, and it's not going to taste good if the ingredients are not right. The second part comes as I use the analogy of the meal recipe, which is the process you follow to prepare the data and put it through the models. And again, depending on what the context of use is, if you have a context of use from an access standpoint versus a context of use to use it in a clinical study, very different purposes and very different processes that are followed from a process standpoint. So The process is as important to work with the data that you have as the final step, which is when you have data plus process together. The third one I would say is finding the right methods and the models, and be open to iteration, like Tim was saying, that if you see outcomes that are not meeting the need for that particular use, be open to iterate it on an ongoing basis and sort of have that avenue built in upfront that new data will always keep coming in. Data is growing at an exponential volume. How can you take that into account as you develop and evolve your models further? So those would be my three.
I'm actually going to open that up to the full panel and ask Tim and also Benjamin if they have something that they would like to contribute because of the different parts of the value chain you work in. So Tim, do you want to follow up on that? What three things would you recommend people look at?
No, I think that Anish was already saying very important points that data would definitely follow. I think when it comes to like the hype of AI, I think there are already quite some very nice solutions available that you can use that usually also have access to some very nice polished data source, but you can actually also use those AIs just before the clinic indirectly. You can use the tools for drug development, in silico drug testing, and then if you have access to validation platform and then also access to this proprietary data, then first of all you know how your drug works better than just the in silico prediction, and you're much more preferable for investors from the outside also in comparison to just making a prediction of dose prediction in the clinics also. So I think I would focus on the preclinical development of AI tools first.
Okay, and Benjamin, from you.
I liked your picture of the meal, and in the end, I call it a bit more drastically rubbish in, rubbish out regarding the data, because this is still now from a very practical point of view in the clinics, at least, let's say, in this Western Hemisphere. I think there are other countries who are much more advanced in collecting data in clinical routine processes. If you have a clinical trial, that's different, because in a clinical trial, you have a process of your data generation process, which is defined by a protocol. So it's much easier then from that to infer and look for quality of data. But interesting thing starts when we talk about routinely collected data, which are not collected within the purpose of a clinical trial, but it's the data you generate every day when we care for patients. And here, any model, whether it's an AI model or you use other type of machine learning or statistics, you need to understand why this data point is here and in which content. Otherwise, you will never get anywhere. And this is very important, and this is why we try to improve our processes of data capture, because in the end, this is probably then a bit of a philosophical layer, but data is process in the end. It's something we do. And unless this process is defined and somehow defined in a data model, if that's not the case, you will always need to tidy up things. And this is where you take a lot of assumptions and a lot of uncertainty. And later you can have a nice model, but probably that's far away from reality. And probably it may work in Basel-Stadt, but not in Basel-Land anymore, as I said. It depends on the geography. Yeah. So from a clinical point of view, this is when we really want to use them, we need to first be better in our processes. It starts with the diagnosis. You may be surprised, but at the University Hospital of Basel, in oncology now it's better, of course, but at others, if you say, okay, give me all primary thyroid cancers, we can find out, but it's not just pushing the button. That takes a bit of time. Yeah, and you may say, how is that possible nowadays? But it's still possible.
Yes.
So I've got one question actually from the audience. So please use the Mentimeter as you come up with a question. Between Ursula and I, we're passing them backwards and forwards between us. So I will do my best to actually insert questions in the areas that are currently relevant. And one of the questions that we have here is, what makes data poor quality? what is it that you have to avoid that causes poor quality data? So, Manish, can you give us an example or a...
I think I start by saying data has it was mentioned that data is a process, so it starts with how you are collecting it, right? In the drug development world, data collection is driven by protocols as an example, and that's why you'll see the quality of data is good. So how it is collected, what the source is, what context is the data being collected in? Again, what context do you collect it in versus what you're trying to use it for down the line? And this is becoming very important with AI because at the time of collection, it is not very well thought through. You can't possibly think of all possible scenarios that AI models can use the data downstream, so to speak. And that is why with AI now making it possible for sort of multimodal compute through a variety of complex biological factors, it's important to think, can the data that any entity is collecting be useful for other purposes beyond its original intent, right? So quality is a relative term. It can be great quality, it can be poor quality, depending on what do you want to use it for, what did you collect it for. But that's the drawing line as a starting point, right? There are a variety of the statisticians would go into this much deeper than I would. Variety of things that happen when it comes to poor quality. Missing data is one of them. Just happens in clinical practice sometimes that you don't have it consistently. Also happens in other ways of collecting the data. So that's where I would pause and maybe give it to Tim and Benjamin for any reflections.
Yeah, maybe one. I mean, the data doesn't necessarily have to be poor to be unusable, right? So, if by design, for example, you start the data process in one hospital, and then 3 years later, the same types of measurements are done again in the different hospitals. A lot of things can change on the way, and maybe it's not exactly measured at the right amount with another microscope, with another instrument. And both data sets can be equally fine and under certain standards and regulatory aspects, but still it's not. You have this batch effect problem where you need additional methodology to merge them and to make sense out of them. So this aspect of poor data quality is sometimes not enough to illustrate the problems that you can have with data.
Anything you'd like to add, Benjamin, from the clinical aspect?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this, what is poor quality? I mean, as a data scientist, I hate assumptions and uncertainties, because then my models and confidence intervals become like this. So I think it's better to talk probably not about poor quality, but about the uncertainty, because this is always something we need to deal with. I mean, any statistics you do, it's about dealing with uncertainty. If everything's perfect, then you don't need statistics. You don't need prediction. Then everything's fine. But this will never exist. So it's more about the uncertainty and how we deal with it. And again, here it depends, as you very much said, what do you want to analyze? If I want to analyze overall survival, I don't care about poor reporting of tumor response in the CT. It doesn't matter. So it really depends on the question you have, and this is probably also why when you do any research with routinely collected data that are not collected with a clinical trial, then you really need to understand the process of data generation, as we already discussed, because missingness is always an issue, and missingness can be at random, as we know, and it can be systematic. And once it's systematic, you have a problem. However, it's hard to prove, although there are techniques, if something is really missing at random, or if there is any systematic mechanism of missing. I mean, this is always comes down to the question for any model you have. And in the clinics, yeah, we are sometimes sloppy. And because we say, okay, this is currently for that process not important, but probably for a question a researcher has in 2 years that could be important. But for the clinical decision in that moment, it was not important. So why should we measure it?
So speaking of that, and I'm gonna stay with you for a minute, Benjamin, because one of the things that you've said is answering the exact question at the time, and I'm going to pivot very slightly. So I think we've interrogated and we're all aware that data is essentially the foundation of what we need. So good data is the focus. But if we think about now how we use it, and as someone who is essentially using the downstream end of all of the projects that are done in the development cycle, if you were to give something to somebody in the audience, which is a health tech or an AI company and startup, what would be a good use case, a first use case in oncology for AI usage that could realistically be built and tested?
Oh, okay. So I think one of the things is, okay, so I think there are two probably fields, broad fields, for what you could use AI. One thing is like you use AI to clean up the mess, a bit like that. So you have scattered information in a clinical information system, and then you need to prepare a patient for a multidisciplinary meeting like a tumor board. And then, for example, it would be great that you have an application where you're pulling all the important data points together. When was the CT? When was the first PSA? What's the longitudinal shape of the PSA? And so on and so on. So preparing data for discussion. That would save time for physicians. And this is what we're currently doing at University Hospital. I think this is one thing. But the better, of course, your whole data capture is and all the other processes, the less you would need it here. Probably in the end, you just need a chronological table. You don't need AI. I mean, this is just one line of code in Python and fine. Yeah. And the other thing is decision making. And this is probably where it becomes really interesting is, I mean, probably some of you know open evidence. I don't have any stocks. Yeah? So open evidence is from the Mayo Clinic. It's like ChatGPT or Claude or you name it for clinicians, where you can ask a question and it gives you the reference and it gives you answers that clinicians understand. And it really blew my mind the first time when I used it. So it's decision making. So you have a case, X, Y, Z. What would we do? Usually we discuss it. Okay, we say this case refers to guideline, blah, blah, blah. Early prostate, we do this and this and this. And I think here is certainly a use case where AI can really speed up this process. So instead of discussing 5 minutes, the AI gives a summary in 2 seconds. They say this could be the right thing, and we just verify it. So this, when I just brainstorm, this would be really something that could be implemented quickly. In fact, we did a study at the University Hospital. It was for localized prostate cancer. It's already some years ago with the older models, and it's pretty accurate. For a defined disease, you give it the guidelines, you give the patient relevant characteristics. It has an accuracy of about 95% of what the clinicians would have decided. But this is not implemented yet. And we know medical knowledge grows. Cases are more complex than just, I'm not a urologist. Localized prostate cancer is quite easy. I mean, regarding what to do and what types of stuff you have. But when it comes to the cases that you have, patients who are kind of not represented in the medical literature or in the guidelines, and that happens like 80%, especially at University Hospital. There you get the cases that are not easily managed according to guidelines. That becomes interesting then, where the AI could then look probably in a set of similar patients and say, okay, these are the guidelines, sorry, there's nothing, but you treated 20, 30 similar patients the last 2 years, you did this and this and this because of this, Explainability, because here was the kidney function that played a role, here was that played a role, this is what was done, and this is what was happened. And now, this would be a great decision aid. It currently does not exist. But this was really then close the loop into a learning health system where we can say, okay, we really learn from the data we have. That doesn't mean that the AI model is currently evolving. It just gives us a summary of data of similar patients. Not sure whether you need generative AI for that. I mean, if you have it in a nice table, probably you don't need it. But this would be certainly a thing that we would like to use very much, but we don't have it yet.
I have a number of questions, and I'm wary of basically turning this into a Spanish Inquisition, Benjamin, and asking you thousands of questions. You have a drink, and I'm actually going to bounce to these folks here for a second, and we'll come back. One of the things that we have here is someone has asked, Obviously, a lot of these solutions are touching patients at some stage on the value chain, and essentially how in the commercial and the industry area, how are you assuring that AI-driven cancer solutions are ethical, unbiased, and accessible? Small question. quick, off the cuff, no problem. Tim, do you want to launch on that one? If we start from research.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are some nice guidelines, and they're increasingly be accessible in different countries and organizations. So, for example, you have the EU AI Act, and that gives quite a nice list of requirements that I mean, overall, you can say, okay, you want to build tools that suit the patient, but then also the AI builders, so to say. But then they also go into fine-grained ethical principles that you have to follow, which also touches on mitigating bias early on before you actually start with the development and so on. The problem is that it's a text written by lawmakers and policymakers, so to really understand what that means for your specific AI use case is difficult, and actually has to be adapted by use case to use case. And there starting to be some literature out there which come with those translations of laws into technical rules. So there was a study in ETH where they compared different large language models for all the ethical guidelines, bias mitigation, and then after the translation they identified specific benchmarks for each technical rule. And once the LLM fulfills them, then you can quantitatively compare those solutions and give a grade to them, right? So, and that's a process, and it's complicated, and it has to be adjusted over time. But unfortunately, there's no ready playbook for each new technology. So,
Manish, do you want to add anything in?
Sure, a couple of things, right? So, AI being where it is, a lot of newness to it, a lot of what we see as machine learning or methods that have been out there for a while. There is, in the guidelines that Tim was referring to, there is enough sort of guidance to translate into practical terms and apply. That should all be done by all means. But also, what AI is meant to do, or what the growing hype is about, is to take every possible permutation combination that could or should have happened into account and plan for that when models are looking at it. And again, we are living in a world that has a lot of data, but once you start developing models, there is not enough data, right? So it's sort of a catch-22, and if the data has all permutation combinations that could or should have happened, the model will learn and account for it, and account for all the things that it needs to be unbiased, ethical, and so on. Far from perfect. There is a lot of learning that needs to go. There is a lot of data that needs to go into these things, and the regulations are going to evolve over time to account for that as we speak. It's not a flip of a switch situation, so to speak. So leave it there.
I'm going to follow up on that question with another one from the audience, actually, for you, Manish. So the question that I have here is, how do you see meaningful repurposing of clinical trial data when there are often restrictions on the secondary use of data?
Yeah, so increasingly what I am starting to see happen in the industry is a twofold process, right? So first, as new studies will start to get designed, what can and should happen is take into account that data has utility, like I said before, beyond its original intent of clinical trial conduct. And if you have that sort of foresight to look beyond its original intent of collection, then from a patient consent standpoint, it needs to be planned for a broader research than just that study. So data in and of itself holds value over its life cycle until it can train a model and help other patients be benefited from what the model is going to tell. So that's one. Second, there's been a number of anonymization techniques to de-identify the patient set and still be able to use. There's far more valuable data sets all across the industry to lose out on the value and just stop at the clinical trial that it was originally meant for. So that is a second avenue to be considered, and in the industry there are a number of publications across pharma that point to that direction, being for the historical clinical studies. The data can be leveraged through that anonymization or de-identification process. Yeah.
Okay, so going back to your point one there about the use of the data in models, I'm going to pivot to Tim here. So from your expertise and your background, Tim, in oncology and in cancer care, should we aim for one large AI model that combines scans, lab tests, genetics, and doctor's notes? Or is it better to have separate models that work together?
The working together part is probably not easy, but I would clearly say, especially on the mid-range and short term, you should start with separate models, because for each of the use cases there will be specialists and that understand the data, that understand the model architecture, how the model architecture performs on the data, and this so far. I think we're not there yet that this can be taken over by large language models already. So until we're there, I would say really stick with your domain experts that can train your networks reliably, and then you can say also iterate on those individual models. You can understand errors better, right? So if you would have one large model in the beginning and something wouldn't go wrong, you would probably have a much harder time to pinpoint where the error comes from. So you can have shorter life cycles, you can build those models faster. But then I think there are some particular use cases which are also emerging, where it would make sense to have multimodal models, where you actually can measure in the same biological entity different modalities. So you know that there's a strong anchor point between those modalities. And then you have also particular research questions. What information can be explained by one modality that is not in the other, and what's the relation between both? And there, a mixed model actually makes sense, and it's also can lead to increased knowledge generation, I would say.
Okay, and so I'm gonna go to Benjamin on this one, because Benjamin, when we had a call, we talked about, and in fairness, I probably derailed the call slightly and could have talked about it for quite a long time. You run the interdisciplinary tumour boards at the hospital as well. So if we're looking at the different models and you bring together the different specialists, from your perspective, what is the benefit of a mixed model or separate models versus a combined model? What do you think will have long-term effect?
I think, so I'm not a technician on these models, to be honest, but just intuitively I would say, okay, that would sound like a super doctor. That would be great. But as Tim said, I think maintenance would be a problem, because you have probably different levels also of development in the different fields. Yeah? So let's say you have an AI reading CT and MRI reports, or images. I mean, radiology is relatively easy because we already have a DICOM standard. So this is probably the good example in medicine where you have a standardized fashion how to organize data. But then you have molecular biology, which is something really different. And I mean, there are plenty of people in the room who understand, okay, now we use next generation sequencing, very simple. We use it in the clinics, but there are other technologies, single cell, RNA sequencing, blah, 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 IMC. So these fields are evolving, and you have, and compared to radiology, this is much faster currently. So, I mean, it's a very probably simple-minded answer, but I think it would make sense to keep these still separated, because they're different paces of development. And also, when you later talk about probably kind of licensing a certain model, I mean, how do you want to do that? If you have radiology, I don't know, clinics, labs, and so on, that would be really, really a lot. And when we think about this type of multidisciplinary tumor board, so that means you have an oncologist there, you have a radiologist, nuclear medicine, pathology, surgeon, depending on the subject. They're all sitting together. Usually we sit together every week, and we have, I don't know, tons of tumor boards. I think 12. We discuss 10,000 cases per year. And everybody brings in the viewpoint and to make up the treatment plan. And if I just follow this natural flow, then I would say, okay, if everybody of them is kind of supported by a specialized model, that would be already great step forward. But to say, okay, a whole model knows everything on every layer, I mean, probably yes, I don't know. But currently I don't know. I don't think so.
And to follow up on that question, we've had a question from the audience about hospital data. Do hospitals share data and AI tools to have more and better data pools?
No.
Okay, there you go. It's a very simple
I mean, there is, for example, this big company from the US starting with an E and ending with an IC. They have some of these features within their kind of ecosystem, I would say, but otherwise not. So we transfer data by sending PDFs. We transfer information, medical information, of course, but in form of PDFs, not fax anymore. I mean, most of the time, but we're not sending data elements, in that way.
Okay, perfect. So I mentioned earlier on that I could possibly start a Spanish Inquisition in some of the questions I have. I've decided I'm not going to. I'm going to store those all to the end, and I'll help everybody on the panel. They're everybody's favorite topic, which is adoption. So we'll get up to adoption of AI tools in a minute, and I think we'll wrap up the end of the session with the adoption. But I think we need to mention sometimes the current buzzwords of the time. I heard someone describe it the other day as you no longer ask Dr. Google, you now ask Dr. Sam. As in Altman. With the new AI systems becoming so powerful, I'm going to Benjamin on this one first. Is it safe for people to use tools like ChatGPT to check their symptoms?
So I won't comment on safety. But these tools, I mean, who has tried it? Come on. Yeah. And it works pretty well. The problem is that I think, so I'm not a psychologist, but the thing is that depending on your condition, isn't it? I mean, if you have just a normal cold and whatever, I mean, we don't care at oncology. We care about the things where we have a real problem, and you are emotionally, depending on the situation, in an absolute emotional distress, depending on your situation and what you want to know from the LLM. And what I experienced with those who did it, not so many to be honest, I mean, at least they didn't tell me, probably did more my patients, but they didn't tell me, is that they cannot weigh the information. They cannot weigh, even if ChatGPT says, okay, it's very unlikely that there's this and this and this, they see whatever, stomach cancer, or they see blah, and bam, here's the information. So sometimes I have the feeling, this is a very vague feeling, that this causes more distress than it really calms you down. It's a bit like when we have now at the University Hospital the patient portal, where you can see all your reports and everything, all for transparency. I think it's good, but what happens? People see a CT report they don't understand, and then they call the doctor, although I'm not on duty. And that causes distress, causes kind of distress on the doctor's side, because I'm not responsible today, we see you next week. But because of that information, something popped up and had pushed the process. From a medical point of view, absolutely fine, we can see next week, but it causes work on my side. It's a bit egoistic what I'm saying now, But this is just what happens if you get information maybe at a patient portal or may ChatGPT, whatever, that cannot kind of be put into a context by a nurse or a doctor. That can have really bad impact, I think. There was a very nice editorial in New England of Medicine. It was already some months ago. They said death by portal. when you get your diagnosis, but the pathology report before you have talked to an oncologist, you see whatever, cancer. Yeah. So this is something we are confronted with, we need to deal with it. And I think it has many advantages, this technology, but it has also some disadvantages. And we still, I think, starting how to understand and how to put that into context with each other.
So I think that's really interesting and important from a contextual perspective and a clinical perspective. But so if we talk about the safety perspective and we think about it from the actual technology behind it, how reliable are the results? What level of accuracy are they coming out with? And how, if people are thinking about using that data to go to a doctor to advocate for themselves, how many false positives or false negatives is that likely to turn up? Has anybody done any research on that yet?
I haven't checked the literature, but I think that depends also very much on the prompts and of course how the patients ask and everything. I mean, but that would be a nice thing to do. You could also do that with doctors and see how that works out. But I mean, I haven't searched it. Probably there is already literature out there. I mean, there is literature out there that in certain settings that patients feel much more kind of engaged with a chatbot of a generative AI compared to a doctor. So there was a study when they were talking to AI, a doctor they didn't know, they just were in a chatbot. And of course, doctors were at some point more, impatient and so on, and giving short answers instead of, yeah, I will understand you, and so all these things. And I think there is something inside. And there are also these more studies that you could use these chatbots for psychotherapy. Yeah. But, and there was just one article I read yesterday, not a scientific article, but in a newspaper, that the problem is, yeah, that works in a way, but the chatbot, the AI chatbot never asks the painful questions. It's always empowering. It's not discriminating. And here we are at the ethics point probably. I mean, sometimes you need to ask the bad question. Mm-hmm. That's bullshit. AI would never say that. Yeah. So I think this is a big topic when we then talk about safety and so on and so on.
And I'm going to follow up that question for you, Manish, because there's one's come up that's really good on this one. Is there any concern or opportunity in dehumanizing to an even greater level with the deeper reliance of AI in clinical trials?
Lots of concerns is what I will start with. So from a concern standpoint, for anybody trying to do that has to understand that any AI bot will sort of rarely start off answering precisely. It's always a spectrum, right? You give a certain set of symptoms, it could be like a list of things that you could be going through right now. It's never a precise sort of diagnosis, right? And the reason it's doing that is there is all kinds of possibilities that it's trained on, and it's unloading, quote unquote, that kitchen sink at you to say, these could be all the things that you're going through, and there will be two kinds of people patiently argue with it to get to some sort of a precision that they're happy with it, or call the doctor and say, what is it? You tell me, because you have a lot more context. I have seen in my own connections people uploading their lab reports to ChatGPT and asking for, here is this abnormal value, what could it be? And there is enough number of sort of misdirectional things that you can worry about and you don't need to, and vice versa, right? So we also have to understand and acknowledge that the pace at which this has come through and started getting used, there is a reason that it started with 3.0 and we are at 5.0. Mm-hmm. What is the need of updating it this frequently? I can only think of one, that it's not doing what it's meant to do accurately, or it's getting loaded with more and more data and in turn becoming better. Could be becoming worse, right? So that's from a concern standpoint. The benefit is that I don't want to compare it with Google necessarily, right, which was the go-to Dr. Google diagnosis, but it is good at processing orders of magnitude higher degrees of complexity when you ask and sort of unload a question at it, right? You're not skimming through the first page of what's come through the search and the second and the third, right? So for a lot of us, the LLMs probably have become the alternative to Google in that sense. Can it be trusted? I won't do it. I don't think anybody should, right? Should you bother your doctors more? I leave that to you, right? Based on what you find out, but it's been a source for a lot of sort of additional stress when you try to self-diagnose with these tools ahead of time, not wait for the next weekly visit and so on. So.
Okay, I'm going to dive into the adoption section now of questions. The first question that I had on adoption is to you, Benjamin. You mentioned when we talked a bit about what solutions you see development and what are available. You said it would be great, I've seen them, but we're not using them. So what is the barrier to those solutions that you're using, or you've seen, that to usability?
So probably just one thing where we already use it, not me, but the radio oncologists, for example, they have kind of their closed system when they plan radiation and everything. And there they use AI to identify the tissue that they need to spare, and that they also repeat the measurement each time the patient is coming. So it's longitudinally really adjusted, and this is done by some tool of kind of imaging recognition, whatever AI tool. So in some cases in medicine, and probably at other hospitals more outside of the German-speaking world, we use it. There's another thing where we use it more and more. It is we use the chatbots, but we don't upload the data. Of course, we're not allowed to. But we still can ask, okay, I have a 60-year-old patient, he has that and this. What do you think? Yeah? Or what is the first-line treatment in that situation? Or what is the literature about that? So to search for evidence. And that we use more and more, certainly. And one thing is, because before we used to do a lot of up-to-date, this is something you pay for, and this is a huge kind of encyclopedia of all the medical knowledge and updated and so on. But this is, since we have open evidence and we have Gemini and all these deep search things, and since the reference is also now true, I mean, when we started three years ago, I don't know whether you remember, you started asking a scientific question for the reference, it was all made up. Was all really wrong, but now this has really changed. So we trust it more. And for example, also when we consult the health insurer regarding a certain, we also always have to write Kostengutsprache, this kind of request for reimbursement. And then when we want to use off-label treatment, we need to justify and give the reference, blah, blah, blah. It takes 10 minutes when you experience an oncologist for a certain indication. Now it takes 1 minute. So this is great. I spare time. And I think from my clinical practice, these are the things we're currently using. When it comes to implementation, what are the barriers? I think one of the barriers is always, okay, it's about data protection, it's about data protection, it's about data protection. It's always the same thing. So then we said, okay, at University Hospital of Basel, we have GPUs within the firewalls of the university hospital. So here we're going to use AI. And we're really looking forward to use the first tools, summarizing reports and everything, probably Q4 this year or Q1 next year. We have it on the agenda, and there are several use cases for the internal medicine part, then for the tumor boards, where we try to use it. Also, one thing is that is the AI listener that summarizes a report or conversation with a patient. I mean, there are already systems out there that work. But we need to somehow implement it in our system. And this. So one thing is data protection and is the capacity. The other thing is also the manpower of good people within a hospital IT who specialize on that and do that. You know? So you need good people who understand what they're doing and want to develop it. And this is another issue, that you need to invest in this stuff.
Right. I'm going to ask now, Manish and Tim, from your perspective on your day-to-day life, what challenges do you see in the adoption of AI, and how do you try and accelerate that adoption within your own business units?
Right. So I start off with the top three sort of adoption barriers. Not enough data, first. And by enough, I'm including not the right quality, not the right quantity, variety of reasons, right? Second, model performance not enough for AI to hit the real world, right? We use the data that we have at hand and apply the modeling process to it, and the performance doesn't give us enough confidence to bring it out to the real world, and that's where there is no adoption. Closes then and there in a number of cases. And the third I would say is this explainability piece is a pretty big one. Most AI, when you go to the regulated side, is labeled as black boxy, and it's hard to explain what the model is doing, what's the input, what's the output. So it's a fine balance of how much data do you put in, and when it is in the real world, will that data be available for the model to consume to give a result out, right? And that is I'll take an example. If you're working with a lab parameter that requires a really complex assay that takes 36 hours for the result to be available, and you're using that in a model that is predicting something that lab assay can predict, well, you're 36 hours too late in predicting because you're going to get the assay in 36 hours, right? So the predictive nature of these models, or what they are trying to tell, starts to diminish, and the trade-off doesn't make sense anymore from that perspective. So those are the adoption barriers, and I mean largely in the pharma industry, it's the regulated side as well, that going through global regulatory guidelines and making everything fit for purpose for every geography, every context of use. It's an orchestra that's hard to moderate and work magic through. So very little sees the light of the day, and a lot more failures behind, so to speak, that are not going through adoption. Jim, over to you.
I mean, first of all, adoption in what realm is also a question, right? You talked about the pharmaceutical industry. I would say there's a very high adoption rate in startups, right? And basically every startup tries to use an AI model or some sort of AI solution, but that comes also with a problem, because if you don't understand, I mean, we're iterating on that, right? But if you don't understand how the model is trained, or you don't understand the data, then you also don't understand the predictions, then you're very easy to copy, and someone else that does that better can take your business case. So too quick adoption can be also a problem. Yes. Then we talked about using ChatGPT as an information source for users. I would prefer a solution where actually the PD can use, or does know best which AI tool is the best so far, or the state of the art, and then together with the patient go through some recommendations together and explain together with the AI. Because I mean, they also, I mean, what Tuyi said, that their AI is very good and integrating complexity, and maybe physicians are still much better in putting that into context. And if that human in the loop, within this case would be the doctor, would do the job and know which tool to use at a given time, I think that would help a lot in adoption. And I think the solution would be education, right? So you would need a better education for the physicians that are not used to choosing the right AI tool and how.
Okay, so we're actually wrapping up at the end, so we've come to the end now. I've got one last question that I think that the audience would love to hear your opinions on just before we finish. So first of all, thank you to the audience for all of your questions. I'm very sorry I didn't get to go through all of them. We have a limited time, but the folks are here at the apéro this afterwards, so please feel free to ask any of your questions in person. But what I will say is the last one is, if we zoom out beyond the technology itself, what excites you all most about how advances in data and AI could ultimately support patients, caregivers, and society? And if I can ask you to all give one example just to wrap up before we leave. So Manish, do you want to start?
Sure. I think the biggest potential is to put growing volumes of data to great use. And in my view, if all humans on the planet combined were to attempt to catch up with the growing volumes of data and identify the story that this data is telling, it won't be possible, and AI is the enabler and the bridge to take us there. And whether it is for the benefit of the patients to bring better treatments faster to them, or it is to get your diagnosis more quicker than your doctor's visit, all of this one day will be possible to a certain extent, providing the right guardrails. But I think that the biggest potential is to put this exponential volume of growing data to great use. So that's and an example I would give you is in cancer care, which is I would call a spectrum of a disease, like you said at the beginning. If patients are able to anticipate by means of their own data, by means of data from their fellow patients, and understand what they're going to go through in terms of sort of practical and tangible journey, I think that will be far more valuable in complex diseases than anything else. And I think AI has the potential to get them there. So, Tim.
Yeah, I think building on that a bit, I'm looking forward to a higher focus on prevention. So because we are able to measure more and more data, also on the personal side, everyone has some sort of variable, let it be the phone or a clock on the body. Those data sets can be measured, and so far it's maybe limited, and the integration is not really predictive. But I would look forward to a future where some of the diseases are diagnosed much earlier, before you actually have symptoms or visible symptoms, and need to go to the doctor, so you get flagged earlier, can intervene earlier. That would be cool.
And Benjamin, I'll give you the last word as our patient-facing representative. Oh. No pressure.
So I think, yeah, one thing is probably what it will rapidly do is that it will save time. Collecting data, collecting information, and making decisions. I think that will be quick. Whether will it really improve patient outcomes? And I think this is, in the end, the goal. And people often talk about patient benefit and patient important outcomes. Then we really need to test it. As we need to test new drugs, we need randomized comparisons. One gets A, one gets the standard, and then see what happens, whether survival is better, whether the relapse-free survival is better, whether it makes really sense to detect diseases earlier, and patients are really better treated and have a better outcome. It comes always down to the clinical experiment in the end, whether a certain intervention, be it diagnostics that help the doctors with AI, or whether it's patient alerts or whatever, really improves outcome. And I think this is a bit where the hype is a bit too much. Currently I have the impression, although I'm really enthusiastic about these technologies, I love them, but from a methodological point of view, when it comes to really showing benefit, we have a lot of information, but we still don't understand it. It's a bit like in the biotech things, when we have all these NGS data, we have single-cell RNA sequencing, we have drug screening, we can generate this information rapidly, but still we do not understand the biology. Still we do not understand, okay, how to really use it. And I hope that AI can fill the gap a little bit, but I still think that it requires well-designed clinical trials, preferably based within directly routine care, so that you don't, for a phase 1 trial, of course not, but if you say, okay, you have a certain algorithm that makes better prediction what type of treatment a patient should get, then directly test it with these patients that you really treat. And I think we still need these type of these interventions. They need to be smarter, they need to be more efficient, that we are faster in the development and also getting the results. But I think this is the absolute basis until we talk about any patient benefit and improving patient outcomes, which should be the main goal in the end. But we know clinical trials are hard because they often tell you, no, it doesn't work. The algorithm works fine, however, sorry, does not improve survival. Same as 2 years. Something new, please. It will be still like that. I think.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So I'm going to invite Ursula and Rahel to wrap up.
Thank you very much for this interesting event. Thank you, Benjamin, Tim, Manish, and Quiva, for the conversation. Ursula, you wanted to start.
I wanted to start. So, no,
I'm starting. So yes, we still have space. We have desks and offices to rent here on Novartis campus. So if you're interested, if you have a health tech startup, service provider, something in this area, come talk to me. Happy to provide information on that.
I think from my side, I said at the beginning, for those coming up a bit later, please don't miss the chance. We have 3 of the startups really disrupting how AI is being used in oncology today with us. They will be in the apero, so don't miss the chance to meet them. And you can already save the date for the next open mic. You know, we are here quarterly, so November 10th is going to be the next open mic. It's going to be on a different topics, so from lab mice to tech, from mice labs to tech labs. So we are gonna dive a bit more into preclinical testing, and it's gonna be an exciting conversation as well. And we have another larger event coming up. It's called the Innovation Showcase. It's our wrap up for day 1. It's gonna be on the other side of the Rhine at the Roche Tower this time, so you'll have to take the ferry, but save the date. It's gonna be December 10 and 11, so 2 days where you can discover new startups, but also have keynotes, have a lot of interaction, and get to learn the trends and what's going on health tech innovation in the pharma and this space. So looking forward to seeing many of you at those events. And I know I'm the thing standing between you and the apero, so I'm going to stop right now. And please welcome, thank you for joining, and enjoy.